All right, welcome into Surviving Paradise, the podcast that takes a sometimes serious, oftentimes humorous look at the claim by Jehovah's Witness leadership that they are providing a modern-day spiritual paradise. I'm your host here, Stacy Bauman, former elder, ministerial servant, and a kid raised as a Jehovah's Witness in the 70s and 80s. As I like to do, things can trigger people, and it's totally okay. You're in a safe place. We try to have some fun here. We try to heal. Sarcasm, humor, experiences, and opinions are never meant to offend. Just my own brand of sharing. Welcome in. Wow, what a week. Straight talk. I'm still somewhat caught up in the latest round of new light regarding the blood doctrine, and it is deeply emotional. Specifically, watching on with awe at the many Jehovah's Witnesses on social media specifically who are claiming that this is nothing new. That storing your blood and transfusing it back into your body, that's not new. That's always been a conscience matter. What? While I understand cognitive dissonance, I continue to be fascinated by it when I'm forced to face it, and it has been a little over a week of that. The very people who may be carrying a blood card or have signed an advanced medical directive ignore that it says storing your blood is a sin for Jehovah's Witnesses. It's in print. It's on the directive. It's incredible. Are you seeing the same sorts of reactions? I am absolutely amazed at the power these men have over Jehovah's Witnesses. To get them to see something in print and then claim it was a conscience matter. It is mind-blowing in every way, shape, and form. But before I launch into my latest stream of consciousness this week, a quick PSA, public service announcement. I will be traveling next week, so I will be taking a quick break from this deeply wonderful spiritual paradise. No need to panic. I'll be back after visiting some coffee farmers, some old friends, etc. Thanks for being here, and I hope you'll be back the following week. So just make a note, we're going to have a week off. I find myself thinking that it's time for Jehovah's Witnesses to face some facts. Some cold, hard facts. This may be uncomfortable. But on the heels of life and death changes, it's time for Jehovah's Witnesses to face the facts. Consider this one. Jesus Christ, the King of Jehovah's Witnesses, is making all of this up as he goes. He's just making it up. You've seen it in the latest governing body update. And yeah, that might feel really uncomfortable for a witness, but it's true. The same guy who walked on water, made wine out of thin air, even resurrected the dead, well, he's making it up as he goes along during these all-important last days. And I can hear the apologists fidgeting in their seats, but it's not something they can deny. You can't deny it anymore. And to be candid, he's making it all up and has been all along. And so I'm starting a new series on this little show because I love a good theme. I wonder who taught me that. And I'm calling it The Jesus Misleads Jehovah's Witnesses, and this is Volume 1. It will reoccur from time to time, randomly, and when I'm bored. And when I get tired of talking about these guys. Happens more often than you think. Jehovah's Witnesses have theorized that it was Jesus who was guiding the Israelites during their 40-year wilderness trek known as the Exodus. Have you heard that one before? Remember, it's got slipped into talks and deep field service conversations in the backseat of a minivan. But you remember, they think it was Jesus that led the Israelites. From Exodus chapter 14 and verse 19 of the New World Translation, where we read, quote, "Then the angel of the true God, who was going ahead of the camp of Israel, departed and went to their rear. And the pillar of cloud that was in front of them moved to the rear and stood behind them." End quote. Yeah, the angel. And that angel has been debated, with many Jehovah's Witnesses believing that it was Jesus as the original GPS system for lovers of Jehovah. And it was reiterated by the Apostle Paul at 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 1 through 4 of the New World Translation, when he said the following, quote, "Now I want you to know, brothers, that our forefathers were all under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and all got baptized into Moses by means of the cloud and of the sea. And all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they used to drink from the spiritual rock that followed them. And that rock meant the Christ." End quote. Yeah. This reality that Jehovah's Witnesses believe it was Jesus that guided the Israelites through 40 years of wandering, it should help men everywhere feel much better about not asking for directions. You ladies were right all along. Men get lost, but we aren't going to admit it, even though it apparently happened with Jesus in the Exodus. In light of how Jesus has been acting since 1914, during these last days that never end, I gotta tell you, it checks out. God's people, the Israelites, just wandered around. They just kind of wandered around for 40 years before they got to paradise. I mean, oops, the promised land. And well, if you read Exodus with a keen eye, you begin to understand that if Jesus was in fact the angel leading them for 40 years, he is in fact very consistent and not much has changed. He is still wandering. He is still making things up as he goes along as the King of Jehovah's Witnesses. And despite that being an uncomfortable admission for J-Dubs, here is a harsh fact. Are you ready? The facts don't care about your feelings. They don't care. And quite candidly, today, neither do I. Jesus continues to kind of wander around. But more importantly, if you believe the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, Jesus continues to do something he has been doing from the beginning. What is it? He misleads people. If you're a Jehovah's Witness with this absolute torrent of new light the last 5, 10, 20 years, it becomes very apparent, and it's not debatable, that Jesus Christ the King, well, he misleads people. And the latest example is a deadly one. Jehovah's Witnesses can now, as of March 20th, 2026, they can now store their own blood. But had you tried to store your blood in, say, I don't know, February 2026, you would no longer be a Jehovah's Witness and doomed to death at Armageddon. Just days apart. Try it in March 2026, and it's your call, and you're still a Jehovah's Witness. Just days apart. And for a thinking person, wow, that squirrely guy Jesus the King, still kind of finding his way through things, still figuring a few things out. Jehovah's Witnesses need to face the fact that Jesus, apparently, he's the King, openly misleads them, raising some very significant trust issues, huh? We are to take what the governing body says at face value and trust them with our lives, because they alone get the messaging from Jesus. How was it Garrett Loesch said a few weeks ago? After praying and reading. And while people may die in the meantime just because they listened and obeyed these 11 men, you're always to obey what they say anyway. You know, what's the quote? The governing body has decided. And as I likely will do forevermore on this show, here is my weekly reminder to the random Jehovah's Witness who might bravely be here listening. From the Watchtower of 2016, November, page 16, Quote, some may feel that they can interpret the Bible on their own. However, Jesus has appointed the faithful and discreet slave to be the only channel for dispensing spiritual food. Did I say only channel? Did I emphasize it enough? Back to the quote. Since 1919, the glorified Jesus Christ, there he is, has been using that slave to help his followers understand God's own book and heed its directives. End quote. Your words. From Organized to Do Jehovah's Will from 2005, page 18, quote, there are many reasons to have complete trust in the slave class. First and foremost, Jesus has appointed them over all his precious belongings. This is a clear indication that he has complete trust in them. End quote. Wow. And finally, from Examining the Scriptures Daily, 2007, page 34, quote, Christ thus leads the congregation by means of the Spirit-appointed faithful and discreet slave and its governing body. End quote. 3 quotes and references from your library. So as all of us can see, we can only know anything or all things King Jesus Christ if we only know and obey the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. And this is where the problems begin. In so doing, we then find that Jesus Christ has a long, established history of misleading mankind. Yeah. And I'm going to use my time here to encourage Jehovah's Witnesses to face that fact. It's a fact, and it doesn't care about your feelings. I'm not going to pull any punches this week. I'm going to be blunt. I'm going to be candid. I'm going to be real. Will it wake someone up that might be listening? God, I would love to think so. Another precious person saved from this insanity? But I'm honest with myself. Many who may stumble into this discussion will walk away with their brains fighting against the obvious. Nonetheless, here goes. I'm about to show you from your own library, your own history, your own broadcasts, that the king, who allegedly took the throne in 1914, just loves to mislead his people. I'm going to focus mainly on just the last 26 years, the 21st century of Jehovah's Witnesses. A century Jehovah's Witnesses were never supposed to see this side of paradise. We got a problem from the outset. You remember one of the many indications that Jesus might have gotten lost or was just really deceiving us all along. From The Nation Shall Know That I Am Jehovah book, page 216, he said, quote, shortly, within our 20th century, the battle in the day of Jehovah will begin against the modern antitype of Jerusalem, Christendom, end quote. I must have missed that. It's the 21st century. From the Watchtower of January 1st, 1989, page 12, quote, he was laying a foundation for a work that would be completed in our 20th century, end quote. Oopsie. It's the 21st century. Was he just messing with us? Was he lying? Is he misleading us? Let's return to just the last 26 years alone of Jehovah's Witness history, as it's becoming increasingly clear that the younger generation of Jehovah's Witnesses have no knowledge of what this organization was doing prior to them being grown up enough to understand what was going on. What has been going on the last 26 years that proved Jesus is misleading his people? Well, I got to tell you, I'm glad you asked. I'm going to here share a list of examples, and I want to highlight the fact that this is by no means an exhaustive list. I randomly picked a few that popped into my head. One proof that Jesus likes to mislead people, it might be one of my absolute favorites, is when the Almighty and His Son instructed the governing body to include a section in their Watchtower library currently available to anyone who wants it on the only website powered by Holy Spirit. And that section is titled Beliefs Clarified. What? Wait a minute. What? Beliefs clarified? Why do we need our beliefs clarified? Aren't they pretty straightforward? Isn't this a God of honesty, a son of truth? First, we do not have the time to consider every reference under the Beliefs Clarified section of the Watchtower Library. However, it takes anyone mere seconds to notice that while scrolling the page on your desktop, a studious person will note that it starts, they needed to start clarifying their beliefs in 1870. And it's updated all the way up to 2026. It looks like it's been well over 150 plus years where Jesus needed to explain himself. And we're done here. We can end the episode. You see, I'm not sure why the greatest teacher that ever lived would need over 156 years of clarity on his teachings. He is the greatest teacher. I was told as a witness that the Bible was perfect, and that it fully equips me, makes me fully competent. But, well, evidently not. Meaning that the Bible itself apparently also features dishonesty that misleads people, because we need a Beliefs Clarified section. But when you visit the Beliefs Clarified section, you can find yourself slumping in your chair. It's a page of admission that the governing body that Jesus appointed either got things wrong or was without question misleading people. And I'm going to go with the misleading people part. Because if Jesus, the king, was just wrong, or the governing body was just teaching something wrong, don't you think he would fix that immediately? Don't you think beliefs being clarified, or a problem in doctrinal teaching, or things that could get people killed would be fixed by Jesus from the heavens immediately, not decades later? For example, the Bible itself seems to indicate that when it means a lot to Jehovah, when something means a lot to God and his king, they react to any dangers to their people, the people they love most, Jehovah's Witnesses. They react instantly. They react instantly to save their people. From Ezekiel chapter 38 and verse 18 of the New World Translation, we're told, quote, "On that day, the day when Gog invades the land of Israel, declares the sovereign Lord Jehovah, my great rage will flare up." End quote. Seems pretty immediate. Something's gone wrong. Jehovah's been watching. Jesus has been watching. We're going to fix this immediately. Maybe we could give them a Beliefs Clarified section. But how about this one? This one has always been a favorite for me. If you want to understand how Jehovah and Jesus expedite solutions to problems, or at least allegedly, consider this one. From Zechariah chapter 2, verses 8 and 9 of the New World Translation, where it says, quote, "For this is what Jehovah of armies says, who, after being glorified, has sent me to the nations that were plundering you. Whoever touches you touches the pupil of my eye. For now I will wave my hand against them, and they will become plunder for their own slaves." End quote. What a powerful verse. How does that relate to the beliefs clarified section the governing body has given us? Well, I don't know about you, but if someone pokes you in the eye, I find myself not reacting to that for decades. I then suddenly grab my eyeball 50 years after they poke me in the eye and, oh God, this hurts. Is that what happens? And yet this organization has a beliefs clarified section fixing problems that got people killed, harmed in so many ways, and it's often decades later, proving that Jesus, the king of this organization, allegedly, apparently likes to mislead people, at least for a time. But getting poked in the eye, I gotta tell you, it's an instant reaction. Did you catch it in Zechariah chapter 2 and verse 9, where Jehovah said, "For now, right now, I will wave my hand against them"? Well, unless you've set up a system to mislead your people, as they're doing in the last days, right? In January 2026, I needed some of my own blood to keep living. But look at that, I had to die. Only to find out a few weeks later, those survivors, that Jesus gave the thumbs up to my own blood being stored. Wait, I missed the cutoff by a couple days? Jesus couldn't have fixed this immediately and saved a few people. It's odd stuff. A mistake? Forgetfulness? Just a change of heart? I just changed my mind because I'm the king. You know, like someone poked Jesus Christ in the eyeball and he said, ouch, years later in the mother of all delayed reactions? Or maybe, wow, this hurts. Is Jesus just openly misleading Jehovah's Witnesses for decades, then posting on his believed clarified section? Not a lot of urgency on life or death matters, even though it's like someone poked him in the eyeball. So it seems very apparent. Or should I be more watchtower-like and say, evidently? Jesus isn't forgetting things in these last days. He is just flat out misleading Jehovah's Witnesses until he decides it's not funny anymore. I think I'll fix this. Whoopsie, look at all the people that died. The proof is under your nose. This is what Jehovah's Witnesses are expected to believe in and trust. I gave it to you from your own literature. The governing body speaks for the King, Jesus, and apparently it's okay to mislead people for decades. The Beliefs Clarified section, I highly recommend it. Go check it out. And by the way, sticking with the theme, you can go back to just 2000 and move forward to 2026. And that alone will blow your mind. Check out the abundance of things Jesus has misled his people on during the last 26 years alone. It's shocking. But I'm going to consider a few of my favorites, and I'm going to number them just to keep myself on track. The 21st century, since the year 2000, has seen a dramatic shift in how Jehovah's Witnesses preach. Would you agree? Dramatic shift from my time. For the better part of the century, Jesus directed his people, and by century I mean the last century, 20th century, Jesus directed his people to engage in door-to-door witnessing. We heard about it all the time. We got songs about it. We were told it was an urgent work that required great effort, a lot of discomfort, sacrifice, but it was worth it because it was time spent saving lives. But it didn't stop there. Going door to door was required to even qualify to be called a Jehovah's Witness. You had to be active. We had the service meeting to train us. We gathered in field service groups. We were taught demonstrations. We were giving talks, which was a form of training for, yeah, you guessed it, door-to-door preaching to our neighbors, to complete strangers. A Jehovah's Witness was told they were blood guilty. Oh, the irony. If they bypassed preaching or didn't give a witness at every opportunity. Consider an example from Jesus and his guys from the Kingdom Ministry of June 1988, page 4, under Presenting the Good News from House to House, where all of us were told, quote, "Our house-to-house preaching activity plays an important part in the sanctification of Jehovah's name. Regular house-to-house work also strengthens our hope in God's promises. Our ability to use the Bible effectively is enhanced. We are aided in overcoming the fear of men. Greater empathy can be cultivated as we note firsthand what people suffer because of not knowing Jehovah and not living by his righteous standards. We are also helped to develop the fruitage of God's Spirit in our own lives. We want to be able to report back to Jehovah and say in all good conscience, 'I have done just as you have commanded me.' Zealous house-to-house activity will enable us to do this." End quote. Wow! That sounds dramatic, sounds serious. I feel like I should play some Game of Thrones music to that paragraph. Dun, 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 dun. Very serious stuff, right? Door to door, house to house, saving lives. Jesus at this time was very direct in telling us what we needed to be doing. Well, only to apparently completely change his mind, and in November of 2011, introduced that he really didn't mean any of that stuff I just taught you about knowing the Bible and saving lives and stuff. But he changed the main form of the preaching work to just standing in front of a book cart. I mean, what? Very active indeed. I've always wondered what the apostles were thinking up there in heaven with Jesus every time someone reads that account about throwing down their fish nets and becoming fishers of men. The music swells. Last I checked, fishermen have to put out some kind of effort. They have a tool, a fishing rod. They're a net. They make the bait look inviting to the fish. But look, folks, with the book cart change, Jesus had apparently misled all of us about just how important going door-to-door work was. What it meant to find people to know the Bible, to teach them with passion and save them. Because he turned his people into fishermen that show up to a lake, pull out their tackle box and a bag of worms, and then they just kind of sit there, staring at the lake as the fish swim by, hoping, I guess, that the fish just jump on shore and maybe forcibly grab a worm. Where's the hook? Nobody knows. And I picture Peter tapping Jesus on the shoulder up there in heaven to ask him when saving lives became such a passive activity. And by the way, what role do those cell phone things play in witnessing? Since I notice everyone standing in front of their book carts seem to be doom scrolling these things. Jehovah's Witnesses' entire existence, the very reason, the entire reason that the last days have not ended is to save lives, to seek people out and to teach them about Jesus. But as of 2011, just kidding, just kidding. What was all that you said before that? Were you misleading us? Apparently, urgently preaching is no longer a thing, meaning all those publications, all those meetings, all those special schools, and more. It was just Jesus misleading us about it all? What? Because in 2011, he decided standing in front of a book cart and watching precious lives just walk right on by, well, that was enough. That counts. That's preaching. No more blood guilt here. I rolled a book cart out and stood there. I'm an active Jehovah's Witness. And when you approach a J-Dub to ask a legitimate Bible question, they don't even open a Bible anymore. They merely look at you and point to their website. Here's the website. And wait, didn't Jesus and his organization warn us that the internet was the devil's playground? Why do you want me to get on the internet and go to a website? I thought it was Satan's playground. Well, yeah, they did in fact warn us. I guess he was misleading us here too. From the Awake of 2019, number 1, page 3, Threats to Our Safety and Security, we were told, quote, increasingly, the internet is proving to be a dangerous place to visit. It is a haven for pedophiles, bullies, trolls, and hackers, says the newspaper The Australian. Identity theft is one of the fastest growing crimes in the world. The internet provides another outlet for one of the worst traits of humankind, the capacity to be vicious and cruel, end quote. But it's okay now. If you approach a Jehovah's Witness, they point you to the same internet where Satan hangs out and all these other bad, evil people. By the way, it isn't lost on me that identity theft is a thing. In fact, I think Jesus may have had his identity stolen the second these guys got online. He's a totally different looking dude now. But how about another? From the Watchtower of August 15th, 2012, page 14, paragraph 10, where we were told, quote, many sites on the internet are morally and spiritually dangerous. Websites that promote pornography pose an obvious threat to the spiritual health of kingdom citizens. For decades, the faithful slave class has warned us about such sites. How grateful we are for these spiritual health alerts, end quote. I don't think they should speak to health alerts. All right, I'll stay on track. I want to know how to live forever in a paradise earth. And the advice that these guys give now from a book cart, if you approach them, is to weed your way through Satan, the demons, pedophiles, bullies, trolls, hackers, and those who steal identities. And oh, don't forget we terrible apostates, to a website. Weed your way through that stuff to our website. All of this after over a century of Jesus claiming that Jehovah's Witnesses only existed to actively approach people, preach to them, teach them, and save lives. Now, most modern-day Jehovah's Witnesses know nothing about their own religion, much less the Bible, but they sure know their website address. They got that one down. I often think about all of those pioneers that could have just drove around in their cars with a jdub.org bumper sticker and counted their time. Can you imagine? I'm going to drive the car through the neighborhood counting my time. There's the website. It's on the bumper. But that isn't as important anymore either. Jesus decided that service time wasn't even a big deal during the last 26 years. He made us do it for decades, but again, he was just kind of misleading us. He made a change. Neither was physically holding a Bible to teach anyone. That's changed. He misled us with that whole thing. You get to know your Bible inside and out. You now just get an iPad or a cell phone. What? And please, some talented person listening, Photoshop me a shot of the apostles holding iPads. I think that would be phenomenal. Remember when Jesus' organization told us to be experts at wielding the sword of the Spirit? Remember that? I got so romanticized with that stuff. It's my personality, obviously. Become an expert at wielding the sword of the Spirit, the Bible. From the Watchtower of September 1st, 1963, page 528, paragraph 5, we were told, quote, as a Christian, the Bible is your sword, end quote, for a moment. Man, they knew what they were doing. This stuff spoke to a young kid. I mean, especially boys, I guess. I admit it. Back to the quote, have you worked with it so that it feels familiar in your hand? Can you deftly slash away the supports of false doctrines? Can you unerringly puncture arguments that are contrary to the truth? If you cannot, you need to work more with that sword by improving personal study of the Bible and by increasing your use of it in the ministry. End quote. Yeah, Bible. And look, that's from the Watchtower Library, folks. And Jesus evidently didn't mean any of it because now you can stand there in an intellectual coma and you don't even have a sword on you. You left your sword, the Bible, at home. Just stand up straight next to the book cart and repeat after me. Quote, please go look at our website on my tablet and visit jw.org, end quote. That's it. The past 26 years alone have exposed that Jesus misled many of us for decades about what it meant to be a preacher and a teacher of God's Word. Oh well. Oh well. But make no mistake, he misled us, and the proof is standing at a local train station or at your park today. But how about a second way, in my opinion, that Jesus apparently decided to mislead his people for decades? And maybe this is only a big deal to me, but wow, did I feel misled when this one landed. Dissolving the book study arrangement in people's homes. And this one hit within, literally, very interesting, it hit within a few days of my personal exit from the organization. This was one of the last big moves that I just went, whoa. In January 2009, Jesus wanted us to forget how important it was to meet in small groups in other people's homes once a week to discuss his latest publication. Just forget about what I've been saying about the book study all these years. From the Kingdom Ministry of July 1991, the Kingdom Ministry said, quote, Jesus and his organization gave us just one example of how important the book study arrangement was. The congregation book study plays a vital role in the spiritual development of Jehovah's people. The congregation book study is a blessing to us. It gives us the opportunity to meet in small groups and receive more personal attention. Never should we view it as less important than other meetings. Your congregation book study conductor takes seriously his responsibility to use each study to strengthen your faith in Jehovah and build your appreciation for God's spiritual provisions. End quote. Well, not anymore. Not anymore. Apparently, all of that spiritual development just isn't important anymore. Because as of 2009, Jesus wanted us to believe he had just been misleading us for decades by making us show up to a smaller group and dig deep into his latest publication. Because the very next month, from the August 1991 Kingdom Ministry, page 7, separated by days from the July KM, quote, active participation in the congregation book study also plays an important part in our spiritual development. If experienced ones, children, and newly interested persons all comment freely, the group enjoys a rich variety of expressions. This is educational and refreshing to all. If we diligently prepare for the congregation book study, regularly attend, and freely participate, our search for wisdom will be successful and we will find the very knowledge of God. End quote. And with that, I will say that in 2009, after misleading Jehovah's Witnesses with this kind of stuff, Jesus decided that finding the very knowledge of God just wasn't as important anymore because he dissolved the book study arrangement. So I guess spiritual development and finding Jehovah's brain and just isn't as important as it once was because Jesus pushed this arrangement, even claiming that it was this arrangement. You remember, for those of us that were there, it was the book study that would be a safe haven during the Great Tribulation. They held on to this for a long time. You even saw it in their famous bunker video, a book study group gathering in the bunker. They pitched this for decades. But as is the case, an arrangement that was, what were the words? Vital, critical, refreshing, educational, very knowledge of God. An arrangement that was the backbone of this organization. Well, it's not important anymore. Jesus was just misleading us. And now this life-saving arrangement is nothing more than a subheading. It's a memory in the Watchtower Library. It even has the word discontinued on it. Yeah, Jesus, yeah, he pulled the plug. The younger generation of witnesses won't even remember that this was a thing soon. They'll be like, what? You went to people's houses? What? But up until January 2009, Jesus wanted us to know that it was life or death until it just wasn't anymore. And I got to tell you, the dissolution of the book study arrangement, it was a big one for me. I initially cut my teeth as an 8-year Watchtower study conductor by being a young ministerial servant who conducted the book study a lot. Mostly because my original book study conductor, who was an elder guy, well, he didn't like to do it. And so he just wouldn't come to the meeting a lot. He'd miss the meeting and I had to conduct. Not kidding, true story. Fond memories for an arrangement that no longer exists. But oddly, the dangers of that great tribulation are still about to hit us any minute, folks. So it begs the question, why did Jesus tell us the book study would be our hub of safety as Armageddon was hitting? Who can remember the service meeting parts with the inserts we'd cover on emergency preparedness, during Armageddon, persecution and stuff, that the book study conductor was supposed to take the lead in? Remember the list of goods we were supposed to have at everyone's house in the event of an emergency? Yeah, none of it meant anything. That silly Jesus, he's at it again. He got us all psyched up for nothing, huh? Hey, I got to admit, it did lead to some fun for many years. I mean, the book study rocked. I got to tell you, outside of the Watchtower study, which I did for 8 years, the book study was probably my favorite. Probably because people would always bring desserts after the study. I got to ask the kids to draw pictures and save a few minutes at the end for them to explain their pictures to the group. It was fun. And one I have a huge story about, me encouraging my group to drink coffee. Bring your coffee mugs. Let's have coffee while we study. We all had our mugs in hand. Remind me to tell you that story. Boy, did that go sideways with a certain sister. Oh, it's famous. Another time. But the book study arrangement and its importance was apparently, I don't know, an illusion? Because suddenly it wasn't important at all. Strange, strange commentary from Jesus. But how about a third example of why I say we can only land on the conclusion that Jesus has been misleading us? And I got to tell you, this one is too much fun. For most of our Jehovah's Witness lives, we knew that the elite moved among us. A group of people so special, we would spend hours trying to wrap our minds around them, this elite group of people that were in our presence. We would try to understand how they were chosen, how they knew they were part of this elite group. For me, as a kid, as far back as I can remember, it was like hanging out with Bruce Wayne. But look, I knew he was really Batman. I knew. Jesus and his organization went out of their way to constantly remind us of this elite group of people who put their neckties and their pantyhose on just like the rest of us, but forget about it. They were not like the rest of us. This elite group of people would someday sit right next to the same Jesus Christ that was telling us they existed. These elite people had so many special titles I couldn't keep track. And thankfully, Jesus' organization was always reminding us of these titles weekly. Titles like Little Flock, Anointed, Ambassadors, Bride of Christ, Brothers of Christ, Israel of God, New Creation, New Covenant, Seed of God's Woman, on and on and on. But they are most famously known as the 144,000. The elite group of the 144,000 is a core Jehovah's Witness doctrine. It's only these elite humans that will go to heaven, where they are to rule as kings and priests. All of this brought to you by the highly literal book of Revelation. It's a number found in Revelation 7 and chapter 14 as well. This is one of Jesus' core teachings, regarding Jehovah's Witnesses, and he left zero wiggle room on its interpretation for many, 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 many decades. Now, keep in mind that most Jehovah's Witnesses are not considered part of the 144,000, and they do not expect to go to heaven, despite Jesus allowing them to preach to everyone that everyone goes to heaven up until 1935. Then he switched gears. He either got his wires crossed on this one, or he just openly misled the right-hearted people for several decades, giving them the false hope that they would join him and the apostles in heaven. Isn't that interesting? He kind of gives time frames where he allows people to be misled. It's interesting. You were a person back then who opened their door to a Jehovah's Witness or a Bible student before they got their name up until 1935, and you were told that you get to go to heaven. Get on board with us because you're going to go to heaven with us too. And yeah, that's what Jesus told his guys to preach up until 1935. The Watchtower teaching that all true Christians were going to heaven is in print. And for those that love math, this means that over a period of 1,902 years, there were only 144,000 people that could be considered to have worshiped Jehovah acceptably. Really? If everyone was going to heaven, for almost 2,000 years, there was only 144,000 good people. Wow. From the United in Worship of the Only True God book, page 111, where we are told, quote, for some 19 centuries after this, there was only one calling, the heavenly one. It was an undeserved kindness that God bestowed on a limited number in furtherance of his own wise and loving purposes, end quote. So there it is. Jesus misled people up until 1935 that everyone goes to heaven. From the Watchtower of August 15th, 1996, page 31, quote, we understand that this heavenly calling continued down through the centuries, though during the so-called Dark Ages, there may have been times when the number of anointed ones were very few, end quote. You don't say. For almost 2,000 years, you're claiming only 144,000 good people worship Jehovah. It got a little lean at times? I'll bet it did. It's about 2 football stadiums worth of people. Okay, back to the quote. With the reestablishment of true Christianity near the end of the last century, more were called and chosen. But it seems that in the mid-1930s, the full number of the 144,000 was basically completed. Thus, there began to appear a group of loyal Christians with the heavenly hope. Excuse me, with the earthly hope. Jesus termed such other sheep who unite in worship with the anointed as one approved flock. End quote. Who? What? One day, you're on the fast track to heaven. It's 1934, and you think you're going to heaven. But then you hit New Year's Eve, in comes January 1st the next. You realize that Jesus was just misleading you the entire time. Because now you're being told you're never leaving planet Earth. And as this 96 Watchtower says, they just appeared. They just appeared. Poof. They just appeared. Proving that Jesus had been misleading people on this number. And that is how you explain this reference when it says, quote, thus, there began to appear a group of loyal Christians with an earthly hope. How exactly? We don't know. We're not told. And what becomes very obvious is that Jesus was just misleading people. He's just misleading people all the way up till these other people appeared. Why? Where did all of these earthly hope people come from? Where can I find this in the Bible? Can you point me to a spot where Jesus says that there's two classes of people, one that goes to heaven and one that goes to a paradise earth? Did Jesus say any of this in the scriptures? You remember the one that makes us fully competent? The organization of Jehovah's Witnesses want to encourage you to not get caught up in the details, people. Don't ask questions. But if you believe this, and Jehovah's Witnesses do, then one thing is an undeniable fact that doesn't care about your feelings. Jesus was telling the planet that they were all joining him in heaven. In other words, he was perfectly okay with misleading people for decades before deciding to come clean in 1935 at a Jehovah's Witness convention in Washington, D.C., when he had a second plan all along. There's another group of people I haven't told you about. This was a concrete teaching that, if questioned, would end up with you being removed from Jehovah's Witnesses as an apostate if you question this. And so Jehovah's Witnesses are required to believe that Jesus only taught about a heavenly hope, but in 1935 in a stadium in Washington, D.C., suddenly revealed, psych, I've been trolling you, there's another group, they're suddenly appearing. Question it and you're gone, and it was that serious. In fact, in the ultimate bait and switch, Jesus allowed his organization to say that no one else is allowed in the elite group that goes to heaven when he put it into print billions of times in his publications. One such example, one of my favorites, the Revelation, its grand climax at hand book, page 125, where Jesus says, quote, "Their being identified in 1935 as the great crowd of other sheep was an indication that the choosing of the 144,000 was then about complete." End quote. Or when he reiterated all of this in the Watchtower of May 1st, 2007, page 30, quote, "Hence, especially after 1966, it was believed that the heavenly calling ceased in 1935, end quote." And I gotta tell you, that one bummed me out because I just missed the imaginary cut to go to heaven by being born in 1967. Damn, I was so close. Why 1966? I don't know. No one knows. Somebody in 1966 said no more people in the elite group. That was done in 1935. Okay. The governing body said it, and Jesus uses them to speak for him, so there it is. That's that. But this entire teaching that there was an elite group and everyone was going to heaven. Oopsie, just kidding. There's going to be people here on earth. And by the way, oopsie, no one else can get into the elite group anymore since 1935. Those are core, serious, foundational teachings for Jehovah's Witnesses that they believe right now. That no matter how much you wanted to be in that group of elite people, you can't get in. You can't get in. They're all chosen in some mystical way that not a single person can explain, including them. But if you tried to claim that you were in that elite group of 144,000, you were likely, look, you're not playing with a full deck. You're a little nutso. From the Watchtower of August 15th, 1996, page 31, where the faithful slave, incidentally, the chief members of the elite group, said this, quote, over the years, some, even ones newly baptized, have suddenly begun to partake. In a number of cases, after a while, they acknowledged that this was an error. Some have recognized that they partook as an emotional response to perhaps physical or mental strain. But they came to see that they really were not called to heavenly life. They asked for God's merciful understanding. End quote. What? If you were one of those people who can read the Bible and see Jesus only talked about heaven, and you got baptized and decided, I'm going to heaven, if you thought you could be part of the Avengers, the same 144,000 that are going to help Jesus slaughter all the rest of us that aren't Jehovah's Witnesses, you can just think again. You are clearly just stressed out or overly emotional, or perhaps have some physical strain. Did you pull a muscle? Again, you might have read the Bible and seen with your own eyes that Jesus never talked about living forever on a paradise earth, that he only ever talked about heaven. But you have a mental problem, according to the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, if you think you can be part of the 144,000. Are you keeping track of all of this? Because it is, you talk about wandering in the wilderness during the Exodus. This core teaching has you wandering in your own head. Wait a minute. But how ironic. I mean, my God, the irony. Because if all of those details that I've already shared about the 144,000, earth, paradise, heaven, all of that stuff, if all those details to a core belief weren't enough to convince you that Jesus was okay misleading people for several decades, consider this. Wait for it. Breathe with me. In an unprecedented move that points squarely at Jesus Christ himself, and I gotta tell you, this is so awkward. He unexplainably, according to his guys in New York, after many decades, Jesus decided to come clean on allowing his organization and his guys in charge on earth to mislead all of us and teach us lies. Because in the Watchtower of May 1st, 2007, on page 31, hope you're keeping track, Jesus decided to come clean when he said, quote, as time has gone by, some Christians baptized after 1935 have had witness borne to them that they have the heavenly hope. Thus, we cannot set a specific date for when the heavenly hope ends. End quote. Wait a minute. I'm so confused. Wait. Jesus, you've been misleading us for decades. You've been telling us this hope was closed in 1935. Hold tight. Aside from all those people that were told they were crazy for believing they might be going to heaven, with Jesus awkwardly watching on from heaven, watching them claim this, Jesus also decided in 2007 to come clean on the fact that he misled his earthly organization for decades, that he in fact still had a few openings for those that wanted to join the elite group of 144,000 Avengers in heaven. Why? What? How? When did this what? Does he even feel bad that he let us all believe a false doctrine regarding his personal promises? Is he laughing at us now? Is this a troll job? Is he kicking back up there in heaven with Joseph Rutherford, the guy who announced that the group in heaven was sealed in 1935? Are they just sitting up there roaring about how gullible we all are? But in case you aren't wondering about some of the things the rest of us are, especially how, the way, the truth, and the life, Jesus Christ himself, can mislead people for decades, take a gander at this doozy. From the Watchtower of April 2020, The Box on page 7, which tells us, quote, how many thousands had become believers? The Bible does not say. But even by the end of the first century, the number of believers must have been far fewer than the 144,000. At that time, Jehovah was selecting men and women to be heirs of the heavenly kingdom. Pay close attention. But the majority of the anointed have been chosen in modern times. End quote. What? The majority of the 144,000 elite group were chosen in modern times? After decades of Jesus telling us they were sealed in 1935? This is the polar opposite of what King Jesus Christ had witnesses preaching, people like you and me, preaching to strangers and into door-to-door ministry for decades. We were telling them they were going to live in a paradise. This is one hell of a bait and switch, isn't it? 2007. I wonder how many people hoping to go to heaven paid for years of psychotherapy after being told they were just under emotional stress for believing they wanted to go to heaven, only to see a newly baptized 20-year-old claim that he was now going to heaven and it was all okay in 2007. In fact, the governing body is adding guys younger than me. Coincidence? Jesus just misled us. And the facts don't care about your feelings. I know it's uncomfortable. This one's one of my favorites. It's a spotlight on how Jesus allowed straight deception to be taught to mankind for many, many years. And look, I'm going to make an early prediction, and I'm not exactly out on a limb here, because those partaking at the memorial, those people we all watch eat the crackers and sip the wine, we're all focused because it's boring as hell unless you see someone doing it. Well, instead of those numbers of people reaching for the cracker on the plate going down in number, indicating that people are dying and going to heaven, and that Armageddon must be close, well, awkwardly, I'm going to call it, those people doing such wild things is now going up. The anointed and this elite group of 144,000 in almost 2 years is gaining members by the day in Jehovah's Witnesses. You can see it at a Kingdom Hall near you. And it's memorial season. In fact, it's tomorrow at the time of this recording. People who weren't even born in 1935 or even born just before 2007, when Jesus apparently decided to stop misleading us all. You can now come back to heaven. I've got a few seat openings up here. Unbelievable. And again, I'm going to say it. Facts don't care about your feelings. If you believe this and you're a Jehovah's Witness, then you have to believe Jesus was okay teaching the wrong thing to us and to people who were basing decisions on what we told them for salvation on a complete lie. It seems pretty neat. I don't know. Okay, I'm tired. And there it is. There it is, our first installment and a few ideas off the top of my head of how Jesus misleads Jehovah's Witnesses, series volume 1. But folks, come on now. This is an uncomfortable subject, and I know that. I get it. And sarcasm is everywhere. Okay? But how about just one more random thought? And I got to tell you, if you're a Jehovah's Witness or you're an ex-Jehovah's Witness and you're sitting here thinking, I have to be able to trust the King, Jesus Christ, even though Stacy just pointed out several ways he's misled us for many, many decades, I need to trust him. Can I give you something to hold on to? I'm bringing back random thoughts. I'm going to give you something to hold on to. This should make you brim with confidence in what you're hearing Jesus tell the governing body to teach us. It comes to us from the Watchtower of May 15th, 2003, page 7. If you're not convinced that Jesus has evidently been misleading Jehovah's Witnesses, this one reference is sure to give you lots of confidence. This one, in fact, makes me sleep better at night, even when things like the blood doctrine change. I need a touchstone. Here it is. Are you ready? Quote, Watchtower, May 15, 2003, page 7. Quote, Jesus Christ had a pre-human existence. He was a spirit creature in heaven during, oh no, there it is, the flood. As an eyewitness, Jesus therefore gives us the greatest scriptural confirmation of Noah and the deluge. Would Jesus use folklore to warn us about the coming end of this system of things? Hardly. We are confident that he used a genuine example of the execution of divine judgment upon the wicked. Yes, lives were lost, but we can draw comfort from knowing that Noah and his family were saved through the flood. End quote. There it is. Jesus would never resort to giving us folklore. He would never do it. And there he is. As a source of comfort, as he always is, my guy Noah. And that settles it. We must trust what Jesus is telling us through the governing body because of my guy Noah and stuff. Just apologies. Just a few examples of what the governing body plants into the minds of Jehovah's Witnesses and brutal truth that every J-Dub must come to. Jesus has no problem misleading you. He'll do it at times for decades. You've seen it, that even life isn't sacred when he wants to mislead us. You just saw it with the change in the blood doctrine. He had no problem watching people die until he decided to, let them store their blood. He doesn't seem to mind if it costs people their lives at times, right? But before you dig deep and default into your new light training, I know that's where you're going. I'm going to get the DMs and the texts. I encourage you to consider why. If you believe and trust the governing body, you have to accept that Jesus misleads you. I just presented a few examples, and he's doing it from heaven. And I'd like to do it from their own words. From the Live with Jehovah's Day in Mind, page 115, paragraph 9, we're told, quote, when a Christian phrases things in such a way that he inwardly knows is leading brothers to a wrong conclusion, to believe something that is really not true, not accurate, how do you think God feels? End quote. From the September 15th, 1987 Watchtower, page 18, paragraph 7, quote, we also need to be careful that we always tell the truth. Being devious or deliberately misleading others in order to avoid responsibility really amounts to lying. End quote. Or how about the December 2016 Watchtower, page 11, paragraph 18? Quote, To lie is to say something untruthful. Huh. However, Jehovah wants his people to go beyond not telling outright lies. He urged the ancient Israelites, "You should be holy because I, Jehovah your God, am holy." Then he gave examples of being holy. In part, God said, "You must not steal, you must not deceive, and you must not deal falsely with one another." Sadly, a person who makes it a point never to tell outright lies might still resort to deceiving others, dealing falsely with them. End quote. It's a harsh reality if you're a Jehovah's Witness, isn't it? Facts don't care about your feelings. Again, I'm not pulling any punches because this is life or death stuff now. But it sure sits strange in your gut, doesn't it? I can't make sense of it even now. Yes, this is all sarcasm. Because when I compare it with their textbook, the Bible, something about all of this is just off. At Titus chapter 1, verses 1 and 2 of the New World Translation, we're told, quote, "Paul, a slave of God and an apostle of Jesus Christ, according to the faith of God's chosen ones and the accurate knowledge of the truth that is according to godly devotion and is based on hope of everlasting life, that God, who cannot lie, promised long ago." End quote. Wow. Lots of really important words there from those verses. Things like accurate knowledge of truth, that God cannot lie, promises. It sure leaves a Jehovah's Witness wondering why Jesus Christ has had no problem misleading them. I want to thank you for joining me this week. I'll see you in a couple. Until then, be well.